from Isaiah, book 55. Ho, everyone who thirsts, come to the waters, and you that have no money, come, buy and eat. Come, buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labour for that which does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me, and eat what is good, and delight yourselves in rich food. Incline your ear and come to me. Listen, so that you may live. I will make with you an everlasting covenant, my steadfast, sure love for David. See, I made him a witness to the peoples, a leader and commander for peoples. See, you shall call nations that you do not know, and nations that do not know you shall run to you, because of the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, for he has glorified you. And now to the New Testament reading from Matthew 14. As you're probably aware, the immediately preceding section of the Gospels describes the execution of John the Baptist. Now when Jesus heard this, he withdrew from there in a boat to a deserted place by himself. But when the crowds heard it, they followed him on foot from the towns. When he went ashore, he saw a great crowd, and he had compassion for them, and cured their sick. When it was evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a deserted place, and the hour is now late. Send the crowds away so that they may go into the villages and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said to them, "They need not go away. You give them something to eat." They replied, "We have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish. And he said, "Bring them here to me." Then he ordered the crowds to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the crowds. And all ate and were filled. And they took up what was left over of the broken pieces, 12 baskets full. And those who ate were about 15,000 people. This is the word of the Lord.
All right. It's a big story, this, to the gospel writers. Thank you for pointing out about where this comes from. In other words, what the story was before in Matthew. That's very important. I guess in terms of when you have a reading that says now, when Jesus heard this, you really want to know what he's just heard, really, just logically. And the reason why this reading, this story must be important is because it is the only miracle story that is in all 4 Gospels. The only miracle story of Jesus in all 4 Gospels. And in 2 of them, it's in there twice. As sort of subtly different, but it's the same miracle, really. And so, out of all the stories that were collected by these 4 Gospel writers, for some reason, this has to be the one that's stuck in their minds and their hearts the most, so that all of them felt it was important to tell, and 2 of them felt it was important to tell a couple of times in case you missed it the first time. I thought we might sort of do a little reenactment. We don't have 15,000 people here, sadly, so we might just have to make do. So there's going to be a crowd. So who wants to be crowd? Actually, yeah, you'll be crowd. Okay. Who wants to be Jesus? So you missed your chance. You could be Jesus. What's that?
You'll be the crowd then.
Oh, that's true. Okay, you be the crowd. Who wants to be Jesus in the story?
I'll be okay.
Thank you. And who will this? Let's say there's 3 disciples. The others are sort of being quiet. So we need 3 disciples. Carly?
I'll be
I've got 3 disciples. Good. Okay. So we don't have to do any sort of too much moving around, but we just want to get the general feeling of it. So, Jesus. Yeah, cutting the cake. Yeah. Rowing the boat. Yes, very good. Good on you, Caroline. Right. So you not only before you were rowing the boat, as Joan just said, is you just heard that someone who you knew very well, we don't know as a friend or whatever, but John the Baptist. You just heard that he had got his head cut off and he was executed. And you heard the circumstances of it. So how would you be feeling, do you reckon?
If I was Jesus, I'd probably feel happy for him because he'd be in a better place.
Well, there's that, true.
Aspect.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think if it was just a lay person, he'd probably be feeling quite traumatised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I get the feeling, but Jesus was human as well, I reckon. So, or we all reckon.
Yeah.
So there'd be part of him that might be feeling. If you put it another way, if you heard that one of a good friend that you knew had been killed, how would you feel?
Very sad and traumatised.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially under those circumstances.
Yeah.
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 Well,
And you've been.
presumably also, I mean, we don't know what was going on in Jesus' mind, but the implications of John's execution are profound for his ministry.
Yeah. If they're going to kill
This is
him.
what happens to you if you
I might be next.
challenge.
Yeah. That's right. You might be next. If I stick my head up, what might happen to me? Yeah. So Jesus was upset, you'd have to say, potentially upset. And what he did in terms of getting into a boat and trying to get a bit of peace and solitude sort of suggests that he was distressed. But what happens with the crowds?
Rock up and I guess try and comfort him, we're
Yeah? The crowds, you reckon they were comforting him?
well, and for themselves.
So there's 2 words I think encapsulate what the crowds were in this story. I'm hungry. I reckon. Yeah. So they're also sick, obviously. They're hungry and they're unwell. They're not feeling that good themselves. So the disciples, it's getting towards night time. So you disciples, what do you come up with?
Get scared in case something bad happens.
Yep.
Crowds could get unruly and could be doing things they don't want.
Yeah.
Nervous about everything.
Yeah. So the crowds are actually picking up on the anxiety as well as the disciples are picking up on the anxiety and they're anxious about the crowds, maybe anxious for themselves in the midst of it all. Yeah.
And Jesus knows how to control the situation.
That's right. So their words suggest that, don't they? So they turn around to Jesus and say, hey, there's all those people, fix it please.
Well, they actually say send them away.
That's right, yeah. Fix it by sending them away, yeah. Tell them to go and get something to eat. Interesting fact, the disciples would have known that a lot of the crowds that gathered potentially there in that place, this was a time in which poverty and hunger were rife. Most of the people except for the very wealthy, like the ones that executed John the Baptist, would have known real hunger. I guess like most of us haven't. And so when Jesus tells them to go back to their villages and buy some food, for many of them that probably would not have been an option. So I think the disciples the implication is the disciples were thinking a bit about keeping themselves safe and okay. So what does Jesus, come on Jesus, what do you say?
They need not go away, you give them something to eat.
What's the important word in that?
Eat.
It's you. He says to the disciples, okay, you get them something to eat. And they reply, disciples,
we haven't got anything much except 5 loaves and 2 fish.
Yeah. To which Jesus says,
Bring them here to me.
yeah. And there's what I get when I look at the next bit of that reading, there's some feelings come in those words. What does it feel like to you? You come from a time of it being full of anxiety, grief, and uncertainty, hunger. And what's happening here?
He's creating.
Yeah, it feels like Jesus is the movement is towards a place of calm and peace. Jesus settles people down, says, just sit down.
He's in a leader.
Yeah, like a kindergarten class. He's almost saying, okay, everybody, hands on heads.
He's showing he's a leader.
Yeah.
He's making decisions, forward thinking.
Yeah.
Is this a peak of his following in his time, the 5,000 people that gathered? Or is that what they say?
I don't know any of that stuff really. No. And
Yeah.
even the 5,000 is, each of the gospel writers gives a different number. The
Okay.
implication is
Academics say 10,000.
they're just trying to say this is a lot of people. This is a multitude, another word they often use. So Jesus gives them the gift of just calming things down and saying, so he's calmed things down. What else happens in this space? We have scarcity and hunger, and it's turned into abundance. That's a really good word. A really good word. Abundance, and also the gift, I think, that's in there is the gift of calm, I suppose, of peace.
I want to know where the 12 baskets came from.
That's part of the miracle.
Magic!
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. And again, I reckon the 12 baskets, a lot of things are symbolic in these sort of stories. 12 baskets, there was a lot of stuff left over. There was so much abundance that not only did everybody have enough to eat, they were left with 12 baskets, heaps of stuff left over.
The 12 is the tribes.
Yeah, well, 12 tribes of Israel. 12 is a very big number in the Bible. Yeah, 12 disciples,
12 is very important.
12 tribes. Yep, it's a repeated word through the Bible.
Yeah, 12 disciples.
When it says besides, does it mean them as plus women and children?
Means as well as.
As well
Yeah,
as,
the
okay.
word is as well as. Yeah.
I'm wondering why Jesus didn't say, we'll take whatever's extra home and feed the family.
Maybe he did, and maybe that wasn't something that was regarded as, we don't know. There's some of the extra bits, but yeah, here's some play lunch for tomorrow, sort of thing. Yeah. You don't get the impression that Jesus took it home, so that I guess that was the whole point of that bit is not about what happens with it, probably. I think it's about that word abundance. This is to say there was not only enough, there was abundance. A bit like our psalm reading, which talked about abundance as well. Yeah. Thank you, crowd, Jesus and disciples. There's another word in here that I want to go back to that we sort of didn't talk about, and that was in verse 14. And in that space, Jesus, it says that after he went ashore, he saw a great crowd and he had compassion. Out of the source of everything that came, the abundance and everything, was Jesus' sense of Jesus' compassion on the people. He had compassion on them. That word in the Greek, where would you think that compassion comes from? The heart. We would have it from the heart. Well, actually, that word in Greek has it coming from the bowels. So his bowels were moved. His what?
Womb, it's womb love.
Womb is another. Yeah, well, that general area.
In Hebrew, it's womb love. Every
Okay.
time you read compassion in the Bible, it's
Okay.
actually womb love.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's not the heart. It's from the It's a gut love. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a gut move, that his guts were moved. His womb was moved, whatever. The word in Greek, who wants to have a go at pronouncing that? That's the anglicised version of the word.
Must look half German.
Does look half German, doesn't it? But no, it's actually it's Greek. Splangschnitzomai. Splangschnitzomai. It sounds more like it comes from the guts, doesn't it? Really, that when you say it like that. So that word occurs only 25 times in the New Testament and refers to, well, my sources had the bowels, the lungs, the heart, the kidney or liver, or womb, as the case may be, probably say in Hebrew, yeah? So, which were all thought at various times to be the seat of human emotions. We very similarly today when we think of something, a feeling that comes from our guts. You know, yeah. To have compassion or to suffer together or have sympathy is to open your heart or your bowels. I'm not sure about the last one. So, but it's not just a feeling, it's actually, in Jesus' case, it's a divine response to human suffering. The thing about this is what it tells us about God. In those days, gods aren't normally supposed to care about people like the crowds. In the context of Jesus' day, the ancient philosophers were called the unmoved mover, or the first cause were names for God. At the other end of the spectrum, you must know that Greek and Roman empires were notorious for using humans as playthings, and I can think of a play I saw a little while ago that had just that sort of thing. They were definitely not known for siding with the oppressed, the ordinary, the downtrodden, or the hungry, but that's what happens here. That is what Jesus, the nature of God that Jesus was showing to the crowd and to the disciples. A God who responds with deep feeling and compassion to the crowd and is moved to respond to that with abundance. Matthew uses the words and actions in this story that seem a bit like the communion meal, and which shows what happens in a way when you move from a world of scarcity, we have nothing but 5 loaves and fishes, to one of abundance, in which Jesus thanks God for the loaves and fishes. Whatever their initial scepticism or doubt, the disciples get caught up in Jesus' words of abundance and gratitude and give what they have, arguably, to participate in the wonder and joy that all ate and were filled. And that miracle, the argument is, continues. Whenever one of us manages to get over our initial anxiety about feeding ourselves and moves into a space of God's abundance, God's miracles continue. When a church puts aside its own anxieties about our own welfare and give to those in need, or stands up for those who are oppressed against the threat of violence and hatred, or chooses to put aside rules and dogma in favour of God's inclusive gospel of love, the God of compassion is working through us. Because the real wonder of this story is that it continues. It's easy to take the story of much of the media that loves to focus on violence, hatred and bigotry and sort of breeds anxiety, but people are still choosing to care for those in need. Miracles still happen. God still cares deeply and passionately for those who are the most vulnerable, the poor, the immigrant and the hungry, and God continues to use us to care for them. There are at least 2 miracles in this story which have very little to do with simply multiplying loaves and fishes. And by pointing us to see them, God also equips us to continue them. So the 2 miracles, well, one is the miracle of the loaves and fishes, I suppose, being multiplied. But I think the other miracle is the changing of the nature of the space, from a space of anxiety and just not the ability to have enough, and the sense that you can't do anything in the face of the need, to a space of abundance and compassion. That's the biggest miracle in the story. And when we take communion together today, it's meant to be a reminder of these miracles and of our task to do likewise. They are told to continue the practice, eating and drinking in memory of Jesus. As we share bread with our neighbours, we are remembering Jesus. Does not the act of giving serve as an act of thanksgiving? And don't we see this bread and wine really as an open form of sacramental table that takes many forms? When we put our community garden together and share it, or when we advocate for asylum seekers, or when we fly the rainbow flag, we are spreading the love, showing God's abundance, especially with those in deepest need. I'll finish with a Lunic poem. His wish list: sanity, beauty, kindness, care, all so simple if you dare. Sweet forgiveness, patience, peace, chickens, blackbirds, ducks and geese, trees and flowers, grass and seeds, hands and feet and coloured beads, cups of tea and distant bells, clouds and mountains, cooking smells, a garden path, a wooden chair, sanity, beauty, kindness, care, and compassion. Amen.